The cantina on Epsilon 7 trading station smelled like engine fuel and alien sweat. Captain Kim Tae-ho pushed through the crowded room, his dark blue military jacket gleaming under the dim lights. Every alien in the place turned to look at him. Some whispered to each other in languages he did not understand. Others just stared with wide eyes. Tae-ho loved the attention. He walked to the bar with his chest out and his head high. The bartender was a tall creature with 4 arms and purple skin. It looked nervous when Tae-ho approached. "Your strongest drink," Tae-ho said in the common trade language. His voice was loud and confident. "Make it a double." The bartender moved quickly to pour the drink. Its hands shook slightly as it set the glass down. Tae-ho smiled. Fear and respect. That was what humans got in this part of the galaxy now. They had earned it the hard way. "Are you really human?" asked a small voice behind him. Tae-ho turned around. A group of alien traders sat at a nearby table. The one who spoke looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Its feathers were brown and dirty from space travel. "That I am," Tae-ho said. He picked up his drink and walked over to their table. "Mind if I sit?" The aliens looked at each other nervously. Finally, the bird-lizard creature nodded toward an empty chair. Tae-ho sat down and took a long drink from his glass. The liquid burned his throat, but he did not show it. "We have heard stories," said another alien at the table. This one was covered in gray fur and had 6 eyes. "About the war, about what your people did to the Helix." Tae-ho grinned. This was his favorite subject. "Stories? Friend, I was there. I lived it. What do you want to know?" The aliens leaned forward. Even other creatures at nearby tables started to listen. The cantina grew quieter as Tae-ho began to speak. "The Terran Helix War lasted 3 years," he said. 3 long years, of the Helix thinking they could break humanity. They had bigger ships, they had more soldiers, they thought that made them better than us. He paused to take another drink. His audience waited. But they did not understand humans. We do not give up. Ever. When they destroyed our outer colonies, we built new fleets. When they blockaded our trade routes, we found new paths through space. When they thought they had us cornered, we showed them what real fighting looks like. A small alien with tentacles for arms asked, "You fought them yourself?" "Fought them?" Tae-ho laughed. "I led raids deep into their territory. My ship, the Soul Thunder, was part of the strike force that hit their supply lines. We would jump into their systems, destroy their cargo ships, and disappear before their warships could respond." The aliens made impressed noises. Tae-ho felt the familiar warmth of pride in his chest. "Tell them about the big battle," said the gray-furred creature. "The one that ended the war." Tae-ho's eyes lit up. "Ah, Kepler 442b, the final battle. That was where we showed the galaxy what humans are really made of." He stood up from his chair and began to pace. His voice grew louder as he told the story. The Helix had their main fleet defending that world. Hundreds of ships. They thought it was safe behind their defensive lines. But Admiral Park had other ideas. She gathered every human ship we could spare. Carriers, destroyers, even cargo ships. With weapons bolted on. The cantina was completely quiet now. Even the bartender had stopped working to listen. "We jumped into that system like an angry storm," Tae-ho continued. "I was flying escort for the bomber wings. The Helix ships came at us in perfect formations, just like their training manual said. But humans do not fight like textbooks." He moved his hands through the air, showing the battle movements. Our fighters scattered in all directions. The Helix could not track us all. While they tried to reorganize, our bombers got through their lines. I personally took out 2 of their escort cruisers that day. Shot them right out of space. An alien with crystal-like skin asked, "What happened to their main fleet?" "Destroyed," Tae-ho said simply. "Every last ship. The orbital stations around. Kepler 442b fell within 6 hours. By the end of that day, the Helix Confederation was finished as a military power. They surrendered within a week." The aliens looked amazed. Some seemed frightened. Tae-ho sat back down and finished his drink. "That is why the galaxy respects humans now, he said. We proved that size and numbers do not matter. What matters is courage. What matters is never giving up no matter how bad things look. The bird-lizard creature spoke up. We heard that many died in that battle, on both sides. Taeho shrugged. War is war. People die. But the important thing is that humanity won. We protected our worlds and our people. The Helix will never threaten anyone again. More aliens had gathered around the table now. They asked questions about human weapons, about Earth, about other battles from the war. Taeho answered them all with enthusiasm. He loved being the center of attention. He loved seeing the respect and fear in their eyes when they looked at him. Hours passed. Taeho told story after story about human bravery and clever tactics. He bought drinks for himself and anyone who wanted to listen. The aliens hung on his every word. Humans are the strongest species in this part of the galaxy now, he said as the evening grew late. We earned that position with blood and courage. Any alien who thinks about causing trouble for human colonies should remember what happened to the Helix. The crowd around him nodded and murmured agreement. Taeho felt satisfied. This was how it should be. Humans were the heroes of the galaxy. Now, they had saved everyone from the Helix threat. But in the corner of the cantina, someone had been watching and listening the entire time. A figure in dirty work clothes sat alone at a small table. The person's face was hidden in shadow, but their hands were visible on the table. Those hands had scars on them, old scars, and they never stopped shaking. The figure had not said a word all evening. But as Taeho continued his stories about glorious victory and human superiority, those scarred hands clenched into fists. The person in the corner knew something that Taeho did not. They knew what the war had really cost. They had been there too. But they had not been in a ship high above the battle. They had been on the ground when the bombs fell. The cantina began to empty as the station's night cycle started. Most of the aliens had heard enough of Taeho's war stories and returned to their ships or quarters. Only a few stragglers remained at the bar, nursing their drinks and talking, in low voices. Taeho felt good. He had spent the evening being the center of attention, telling tales of human courage and victory. The aliens had looked at him with the proper mix of fear and respect. This was how it should be. Humans were the heroes of the galaxy now. He was about to order one final drink when he heard the scrape of a chair being pulled back. The figure from the corner table was standing up. In the dim light, Taeho could see it was a woman. She was human with short black hair and wearing old work clothes. Her movements were careful and slow, like someone who had learned to be very quiet. The woman walked over to his table and sat down across from him without asking. Taeho looked at her with surprise. Up close, he could see she was probably in her 30s, maybe a little older. Her face was thin and serious. Her dark eyes seemed to look right through him. You talk about the war like it was glorious, she said quietly. Her voice had an accent he recognized from the outer colony worlds. Places far from Earth where life was harder. Taeho straightened up in his chair. It was glorious. We saved the galaxy from the Helix threat. Every human should be proud of what we accomplished. The woman shook her head slowly. My name is Park Soo-jin. I was there too, on Kepler 442b, but I was not in a ship. Taeho felt a small chill run down his spine. Something in her voice made him uncomfortable. You were on the planet during the battle? I was a civilian engineer, Soo-jin said. I worked on the water treatment systems for New Seoul City. It was the biggest human settlement on that world. 3 million people lived there. She paused and looked down at her hands. Taeho could see the scars now. Burns and cuts that had healed badly. Her fingers shook slightly as she spoke. I lived through your glorious final battle, she continued. From the ground. While you were up there shooting at Helix ships, I was down below trying to keep people alive. Taeho felt defensive. We had to win that battle. The Helix would have used that planet as a base to attack other human worlds. Millions more would have died if we had not stopped them. Do you know what orbital bombardment looks like from the surface? Soo-jin asked. Her voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it. The first wave hit the military targets, the spaceport, the defense stations. That made sense. That was war. She looked up at him with those dark eyes. But then came the second wave, and the third. The bombs kept falling, on power plants, on hospitals, on schools. Tae-ho shifted in his seat. There must have been military targets near those places. Sometimes civilian areas get hit by accident. That is the cost of war. Accident? Soo-jin's voice got harder. The elementary school in Sector 7 was 3 kilometers from the nearest military base. The children's hospital in Sector 12 was clearly marked with medical symbols. Your fleet targeted them on purpose. That is impossible, Tae-ho said quickly. Human forces do not target civilians. We are the good guys. We were fighting to protect people. Soo-jin was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was very soft. I spent 14 hours in the emergency shelter under the water treatment plant. 14 hours listening to the bombs fall above us. The children were crying. The old people were praying. The walls shook every time another building got hit. She closed her eyes as if remembering something painful. When the bombing finally stopped, I went outside. New Seoul City was gone. 3 million people and the city was just gone. Fires everywhere. Buildings turned to rubble. Bodies in the streets. Tae-ho felt sick to his stomach. The Helix must have done that. They were known for targeting civilians, that is why we had to stop them. The bombs had human markings on them, Soo-jin said simply. I found pieces of them in the wreckage. Earth Alliance serial numbers, made in factories on Luna and Mars. The cantina seemed very quiet now. Even the bartender had stopped moving. Tae-ho realized that other people were listening to their conversation. You do not understand, he said desperately. We were fighting for the survival of humanity. Sometimes hard choices have to be made. The Helix were using human civilians as shields. There were no Helix on Kepler 442b, Soo-jin said. Just humans. 3 million humans who had been living there for 50 years. They were colonists. Farmers and teachers and engineers like me. People who just wanted to build a life on a new world. Tae-ho stared at her. That cannot be right. Kepler 442b was a Helix stronghold. Our intelligence report said, Your intelligence reports were wrong, Soo-jin interrupted. Or someone lied to you. The Helix had pulled out of that system 6 months before your attack. They left the human colonists behind because they did not think Earth would bomb its own people. The words hit Tae-ho like a physical blow. He had been so proud of the victory at Kepler 442b. It was the battle that ended the war, the moment when humanity proved its strength to the galaxy. No, he said weakly. We were heroes. We saved everyone. Soo-jin reached across the table and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold. I do not blame you personally, she said. You were a soldier following orders. You believed what your commanders told you. But the war was not glorious. It was not clean. And victory came at a price that most people will never know about. She stood up from the table, moving with that same careful quietness. 3 million people died that day. Not soldiers, not enemies. Just humans who were in the wrong place when their own fleet decided they were acceptable losses. Tae-ho sat in silence as she walked toward the cantina exit. At the door, she turned back to look at him. If you want to know what really happened during the war, she said, come find me tomorrow. Dock Level 7, Workshop 42. I will show you what victory actually looks like. Then she was gone, leaving Tae-ho alone with his drink and his crumbling certainties. Tae-ho did not sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Soo-jin's scarred hands and heard her quiet voice talking about falling bombs. He kept telling himself that she must be wrong. The war had been necessary. Humans were the heroes. They had saved the galaxy from the Helix threat, but doubt was like poison in his mind. It grew stronger as the hours passed. When the station's morning cycle began, Tae-ho made a decision. He needed to know the truth. He needed to prove to himself that Soo-jin was mistaken about what happened at Kepler 442b. Dock Level 7 was in the lower part of Epsilon 7. The air was thicker down there, full of machinery smells and recycling systems. Taeho found Workshop 42 easily enough. It was a small space wedged between two larger repair bays. He pressed the door chime and waited. After a moment, Soo-jin's voice came through the speaker. "Come in, Captain Kim. I was wondering if you would show up." Chatter. Workshop door slid open. Taeho stepped inside and looked around with surprise. The space was much larger than it seemed from outside. Every wall was covered with equipment and tools. Workbenches held pieces of technology from dozens of different alien species. Everything was organized with military precision. Soo-jin was bent over a complex device that looked like a medical scanner. She wore the same work clothes as the night before, but her hands were steady now. She was in her element here. "What is this place?" Taeho asked. "My workshop," Soo-jin said without looking up. "I repair things, mostly ship systems and life support equipment, but I also build new devices when people need them." She set down her tools and turned to face him. "You came here because you want to know if I was telling the truth last night about Kepler 442b. Taeho nodded. "I need to know what really happened. The official report said we destroyed a major Helix base. They said it was a great victory." Soo-jin walked to a wall panel and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between them. Taeho could see what looked like a planet's surface from orbit. "This is Kepler 442b before your attack," she said. "You can see New Seoul City here, the agricultural zones here and here, the mining operations. In the northern continent, all human settlements. No military bases except for a small defense station at the spaceport." The image changed. Now it showed the same planet after the bombardment. Where the city had been, there was only a crater. The green agricultural zones were black with fire damage. The mining sites were collapsed ruins. "This is after," Soo-jin said simply. Taeho stared at the images. "How do you have this data? These are not public records." "I am good with computers," Soo-jin said. "And I know people who survived, people who made it off-world before the attack. They shared what they had." She deactivated the display and walked to another part of the workshop. Taeho followed her. "You want to know what I really do here?" she asked. "I build things to help the survivors, the people who lived through battles like Kepler 442b. She showed him a device that looked like a small box with tubes attached to it. Water purifier, designed for refugee camps. It can clean any water even if it has radiation or chemical contamination. I have built over 2,000 of these. Next was something that looked like a communication array, but much smaller than standard models. Emergency beacon. It helps scattered families find each other. When people get separated during evacuations, they use these to reconnect. I have made 500 so far." She moved to another workbench. This one held medical equipment. Trauma healing unit. It can treat burn wounds and radiation sickness, the kind of injuries people get when their cities are bombed from orbit. Taeho felt overwhelmed. Every device Soo-jin showed him told a story of suffering and loss, but also of hope and determination. "How many?" he asked quietly. "How many what? How many people survived Kepler 442b?" Soo-jin was quiet for a moment. "Maybe 50,000 made it to the emergency shelters. They were the lucky ones. Most died later from radiation poisoning or infected wounds. The final count was about 12,000 survivors." Taeho did the math in his head. 12,000 out of 3 million. It made him feel sick. "Where did they go?" he asked. "Everywhere," Soo-jin said. "Some came here to Epsilon 7. Others went to the Outer Rim colonies. A few even made it back to Earth, though most were not welcome there. Nobody wanted to hear their stories. It was easier to believe in the glorious victory." She picked up another device from her workbench. This one was still incomplete. Medical scanner. It can detect diseases that spread in refugee camps. Poor nutrition and stress make people weak. They get sick easily. Taeho watched her work. Her movements were precise and careful. Every tool had its place. Every component was tested before installation. You do this for free? He asked. Money is not important, Sujin said. These people lost everything, their homes, their families, their entire way of life. The least I can do is help them build something new. She looked up at him. This is what victory looks like from the ground, Captain. Not parades and medals, not glory and honor. Just people trying to survive and rebuild after everything they knew was destroyed. Taeho sat down heavily on a nearby stool. His whole understanding of the war was falling apart. He had been so proud of his service, so certain that he was one of the heroes. I did not know, he said quietly. Nobody told us about the civilian casualties. We were told that Kepler 442b was a military target. We thought we were protecting innocent people. Sujin nodded. Most soldiers did not know. The truth was classified. Too dangerous for morale. It was easier to let everyone believe in the clean victory. She set down her tools and looked directly at him. I do not blame you, Taeho. You were doing what you thought was right. But now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Taeho looked around the workshop again. Every device represented hope growing from tragedy. Every tool was being used to heal rather than harm. I do not know, he admitted. Everything I believed about the war, about humanity's place in the galaxy, it was all wrong. Not wrong, Sujin said gently. Incomplete. Yes, the war caused terrible damage. Yes, innocent people died. But that is not the end of the story. She gestured to her workshop full of life-saving equipment. Humans did not just fight the war. We survived it. We adapted. We learned to build instead of just destroy. That is what makes us special in this galaxy. Not our weapons or our ships. Our ability to keep going when everything falls apart. Sujin led Taeho deeper into her workshop, past the repair stations and equipment stores. At the back of the space was a door he had not noticed before. She placed her hand on a scanner and the door slid open. This is my private area, she said, where I keep the things that matter most. They entered a smaller room that felt completely different from the workshop. The walls were covered with holographic displays, but these were not technical diagrams or repair manuals. They were faces, thousands of human faces looking out at them. Taeho stepped closer to one of the displays. Each face had a name underneath. It Lee Min-ho, age 7. Kim So-young, age 43. Park Dong-woo, age 68. Under each name was more information. Their home address on Kepler 442b, their job, their family members. What is this? Taeho asked, though he was beginning to understand. A memorial, Sujin said softly. Everyone who died at Kepler 442b. I have been collecting their names and pictures for 5 years now. Every survivor I meet tells me about someone they lost. Slowly, I am building a record of who they were. Taeho walked around the room. The displays showed faces of all ages. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never see their families again. Grandparents who had spent their whole lives building a new world, only to have it destroyed in a single day. There are so many, he whispered. Nearly 3 million, Sujin confirmed. Each one was a real person with hopes and dreams. They were not just numbers in a casualty report. She moved to a control panel and activated another set of displays. These showed different faces. But this memorial is not just about death, she said. It is also about what came after. The new images showed the survivors. Taeho could see the same scarred hands and haunted eyes that Sujin had. But he could also see something else. Determination, strength, the refusal to give up. This is Lee. Jinwoo, Sujin said, pointing to a picture of a middle-aged man with burn scars on his face. He lost his wife and 2 children in the bombing. He could have given up. Instead, he started a school for refugee children on Tau City. He teaches them engineering and helps them build new lives. She moved to another picture. A young woman with prosthetic arms. Han Yuri. She lost both arms when her apartment building collapsed. Now she designs better prosthetics for other injured survivors. Her work has helped hundreds of people. Picture after picture told the same story. People who had lost everything but found the strength to rebuild. Not just for themselves, but for others who needed help. This is the mark the war left, Sujin said. Not just destruction but transformation. Every person who survived became stronger. Every tragedy taught us something new about how to help each other. She activated a larger display that showed a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of points of light were scattered across it. These are places where Kepler 402b survivors have settled, she explained. They are teachers, doctors, engineers, farmers. They are building new communities and helping other refugees from different conflicts. Taeho studied the map. The survivors had spread out across dozens of star systems. They had not clustered together or tried to recreate what they had lost. Instead, they had integrated with existing communities and shared what they had learned. They are making the galaxy better, he realized. Exactly, Sujin said. The Helix thought that destroying our cities would break human spirit. Instead, it created something they could never understand. A network of people who know how to survive anything and help others do the same. She moved to yet another display. This one showed technical diagrams and project reports. This is my real work, she said. Not just repairing machines, but coordinating relief efforts across the galaxy. Every device I build here gets copied and sent to other workshops. Every technique I develop gets shared with other engineers. Taeho looked at the project list. Water purification systems for drought-stricken worlds, emergency shelters for war refugees, communication networks for scattered families, medical equipment for colonies without hospitals. The scope was incredible. How many people are part of this network? He asked. Thousands, Sujin replied. Not just survivors from Kepler 442b, people from other battles, other tragedies, humans who understand that the galaxy is full of suffering and that someone needs to help. She activated a final display. This one showed recent messages from across the galaxy. Requests for help, reports of successful projects, thank you notes from communities that had been assisted. Yesterday I got word that the water purifiers we sent to Rigel 7 prevented a cholera outbreak in the refugee camps there, she said. Last week our communication arrays helped reunite 50 families who were separated during the evacuation of Proxima Station. Taeho felt overwhelmed by the scale of what she was showing him. This was not just about Kepler 442b anymore. This was about humanity's role in the galaxy, not as conquerors or warriors, but as healers and builders. The aliens in the cantina last night, he said slowly. They fear humans because they think we are dangerous fighters, but they do not know about this. Some do, Sujin said. The ones who have been helped by our networks. They know that humans can be dangerous, yes. But they also know that we will help anyone who needs it, regardless of species or politics. She turned off the displays and looked at him directly. This is what the war really accomplished, Taeho. Not just victory over the Helix. It forced humanity to grow up, to become something better than we were before. Taeho sat down in a chair near the memorial wall. The faces of the dead looked down at him, but now he could see them differently, not as victims but as the foundation for something greater. I spent 5 years boasting about military victories, he said quietly. I thought that made me a hero. But you and the other survivors are the real heroes. You took the worst thing that could happen and turned it into hope for others. Sujin sat down across from him. You were not wrong to be proud of your service, she said. The war needed to be fought. The Helix were a real threat. But the fighting was only the beginning. The real victory is what we built afterward. The next morning, Sujin took Taeho to the observation deck of Epsilon 7. It was a massive transparent dome that offered a view of the space around the trading station. Ships from dozens of different species moved in careful patterns, loading and unloading cargo, refueling, making repairs. Look out there, Sujin said. What do you see? Taeho studied the scene. Trade ships mostly, some passenger vessels, a few military escorts. Normal space traffic for a neutral station. Look closer, she urged. See the ship with the blue markings? That is a Helix medical transport. They are delivering medicine to colonies that were damaged in the war. The ship next to it belongs to the Tau Collective. They are loading food supplies for refugee settlements. Taeho looked more carefully. Now that she pointed it out, he could see the cooperation happening all around them. Former enemies working together. Species that had fought brutal wars now, sharing resources and information. This station exists because of what humanity learned during the war, Sujin continued. Before the conflict, each species stayed in its own territory. Trade was limited, trust was rare. But when the fighting ended, humans started building bridges. She pointed to a section of the station where construction was ongoing. That is, a new medical facility, funded by human survivors, staffed by doctors from 6 different species. It will treat anyone who needs help, regardless of where they come from. Taiho watched a group of workers installing equipment. Humans, Helix, and other aliens working side by side. It was remarkable, but also confusing. "I do not understand," he said. "The Helix were our enemies. They tried to destroy human colonies. Why are we helping them now?" Sujin was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because we learned something important during the war. The Helix leaders who started the conflict were not the same as the ordinary Helix people who suffered through it. Just like the human admirals who ordered the bombing of Kepler 442b were not the same as the civilians who died there." She gestured toward the medical transport. "Those Helix doctors down there lost friends and family too. Their worlds were bombed just like ours. When the war ended, they had the same choice we did. They could spend their lives hating their former enemies, or they could work to make sure the galaxy never went through another war like that." Taiho thought about this. It challenged everything he had believed about the conflict. In his mind, the war had been simple. Humans were good, Helix were bad. Victory was clear and complete. "The aliens in the cantina," he said slowly. "They fear humans because they think we might attack them next. They see us as conquerors." "Some do," Sujin agreed. "But others see us differently. They see us as the species that chose to rebuild rather than just celebrate victory. The species that extended a hand to former enemies instead of crushing them completely." She activated a portable display that showed statistics and reports. Human refugee assistance has helped over 10 million displaced beings in the last 5 years. Not just humans, all species. We have shared our technology, our resources, and our knowledge with anyone who needed it. Taiho studied the numbers. Medical aid to former Helix colonies. Food supplies to neutral worlds caught in the conflict. Educational programs for war orphans of all species. The scope was staggering. "Why?" he asked. "Why help people who were shooting at us just a few years ago?" Sujin smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Because we learned that survival is not just about being strong enough to win fights. It is about being smart enough to prevent future fights from happening." She pointed to a large cargo ship that was being loaded with construction equipment. "That ship is heading to a former Helix world to help rebuild their industrial infrastructure. In 5 years, that world will be producing goods that benefit the entire galaxy. The people there will have jobs and homes and hope for the future. They will not be desperate enough to start another war." Taiho began to understand. "You are building stability." "Exactly. Hungry, desperate people make wars. Prosperous, hopeful people make peace. By helping former enemies recover, we make sure they do not become future enemies." She showed him more data. Trade agreements between former adversaries. Scientific collaboration between species that had been killing each other a few years before. Cultural exchange programs that helped different peoples understand each other. "This is humanity's real strength," Sujin said. "Not our weapons or our tactics. Our ability to see beyond immediate victory to long-term survival. We understand that in a galaxy full of different species, cooperation is the only way everyone can thrive." Taiho looked out at the ships again. Now he could see the bigger picture. This was not just trade and commerce. This was the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization. One based on mutual aid rather than mutual destruction. "What about the people who started the war?" he asked. "The Helix leaders who ordered attacks on human colonies. The human admirals who ordered the bombing of civilian targets. They must still be out there somewhere." Sujin's expression hardened slightly. "Some are dead. Some are in prison. A few escaped to the outer rim and are probably plotting new conflicts, but they do not matter anymore. How can you say that? They are responsible for millions of deaths. Because they represent the old way of thinking, she explained. The idea that strength comes from defeating enemies, that security comes from making others fear you, that success means taking what you want by force. She gestured toward the peaceful scene outside the observation deck. This represents the new way. Strength comes from helping others become strong too. Security comes from making sure everyone has what they need. Success means building something that benefits everyone. Taeho felt a profound shift in his understanding. For years, he had defined himself by his war service. His identity was built around being a victor, a hero, someone who had defeated humanity's enemies. What does that make me? He asked quietly. I was part of the old way. I celebrated the bombing of Kepler 442b. I told stories about glorious battle to impress aliens with human strength. Sujin put her hand on his shoulder. It makes you human, she said gently. Someone who can learn and grow and change. The question is not what you did during the war. The question is what you will do now that you know the whole truth. Below them, another ship was docking. This one had markings from Earth. As they watched, human aid workers began unloading medical supplies and construction equipment. There are two paths forward, Sujin said. You can go back to telling war stories in cantinas, impressing aliens with tales of human military might, or you can help build the future that makes those wars unnecessary. Taeho looked at her scarred hands, steady now as they operated the display controls. He thought about the thousands of faces in her memorial, the survivors who had turned tragedy into hope, the former enemies who were now working together to heal the galaxy. Show me how, he said. 2 weeks later, Taeho stood in the docking bay of Epsilon 7, watching the final preparations for departure. His ship, the Soul Thunder, looked different now. The military victory markings had been painted over. The weapon pods had been replaced, with cargo containers full of medical supplies and construction equipment. Sujin approached carrying a data tablet and wearing a clean set of work clothes. She had agreed to come with him on this mission. Her engineering skills and his leadership experience would be needed where they were going. Final supply check is complete, she reported. We have enough materials to establish basic infrastructure for 5,000 people. Water purification systems, emergency shelters, communication arrays, and medical equipment. Taeho nodded. What about the local situation report? Sujin activated the tablet and showed him the latest intelligence. Kepler 186f, former Helix colony world. Population of mixed species, mostly refugees from various conflicts. They have been struggling since the war ended. No stable government, limited resources, frequent conflicts between different groups. The destination was not random. The planet had been suggested by Sujin's network of contacts across the galaxy. It was a place where their help was desperately needed, but also where success could demonstrate the new path forward for galactic civilization. The local leaders agreed to our terms? Taeho asked. They did, Sujin confirmed. No weapons, no taking sides in local disputes, no demands for political control. We help establish basic infrastructure and teach them how to maintain it themselves. After that, we leave. This was the model that had worked on dozens of other worlds, humans arriving not as conquerors or peacekeepers, but as builders and teachers. They would stay long enough to get essential systems working, then move on to the next place that needed help. A voice over the comm system announced final boarding call. Taeho and Sujin made their way to the ship's bridge. The crew was small but skilled, 2 other engineers from Sujin's network, a medical officer, and a communications specialist. All of them were volunteers who understood the mission. As the Soul Thunder undocked from Epsilon 7, Taeho took one last look at the trading station. In the 2 weeks he had spent there, his entire worldview had changed. He was no longer a war hero trading on past glory. He was part of something much more important. Jump coordinates locked in, reported the navigation officer. Ready for hyperspace. Take us out, Taeho ordered. The stars stretched into lines as they entered hyperspace. During the journey, Sujin briefed the crew on what they would find at their destination. Kepler 186f had been a prosperous agricultural world before the war. The Helix had established extensive farming operations in several small cities. When the war ended, the Helix government collapsed and withdrew from most of their outer colonies. The local population was left without support or supplies. Different groups began fighting over resources. Infrastructure broke down. What had once been a peaceful farming world became a place of poverty and conflict. Similar situations exist on hundreds of worlds, Sujin explained. Former colonies abandoned by their parent governments. Mixed populations trying to survive without adequate resources. These places become breeding grounds for pirates, warlords, and eventually new wars. But they also represent opportunity, added Dr. Lee, the medical officer. If we can help them stabilize and prosper, they become examples for other struggling worlds. Success breeds success. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Taeho studied everything he could about humanitarian aid operations. This was completely different from military missions. Success was not measured by enemies defeated or territory captured, but by lives improved and communities strengthened. When they dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 186f, the planet looked beautiful from orbit. Green continents, blue oceans, white cloud formations. But Sujin's sensors told a different story. Most of the major cities were dark. Agricultural areas showed signs of abandonment. There were very few energy signatures indicating active technology. "We are being hailed," reported the communications officer. Multiple sources, some in standard trade language, others in local dialects. "Put the main signal through," Taeho ordered. A voice crackled over the speaker. It sounded tired but hopeful. "Human ship Soul Thunder, this is Administrator Chen at New Haven Settlement. We have been expecting you. Landing coordinates are being transmitted now." The landing site was what had once been a regional spaceport. Most of the facilities were damaged or abandoned, but one landing pad was still functional. As the Soul Thunder settled onto the surface, Taeho could see people gathering at a safe distance. Humans, Helix, and several other species all watching with cautious hope. Administrator Chen met them at the landing pad. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and tired eyes. "Welcome to Kepler 186f, he said. "Though I am not sure how welcoming it will be. We have many problems and few solutions." Sujin stepped forward. "That is why we are here, to help you find those solutions." Over the next several hours, they toured the settlement. New Haven was home to about 3,000 people from a dozen different species. They had been struggling to survive since the Helix withdrawal 2 years earlier. Food production was barely adequate. The water treatment plant was failing. Communication with other settlements was sporadic, but Taeho also saw something else. Despite their hardships, the people were working together. Humans and Helix shared resources. Different species collaborated on repairs and farming. Children of various backgrounds played together in the streets. "This is what we want to preserve," Administrator Chen explained. "We have built something here that works. Different species living in peace. But without basic infrastructure, we cannot survive much longer." That evening, Taeho and Sujin met with the settlement's leadership council. Representatives from each major group sat around a simple table in the community center. The discussion was conducted in the common trade language, but Taeho could hear multiple other languages being spoken quietly as people translated for others. "Our biggest problem is water," said Yex, a Helix engineer with blue-green skin. "The main treatment plant is breaking down. We have parts from 3 different manufacturers, none of them compatible. We keep fixing one system only to have another fail." Sujin nodded. "I brought modular purification units that can work with any existing infrastructure. We can also teach your people how to manufacture replacement parts using local materials." A human woman named Dr. Park spoke next. "We have medical supplies for maybe 2 more months. After that, people will start dying from preventable diseases, the children especially." "We have medical equipment and medicines," Dr. Lee replied. "But, more importantly, we can help you establish sustainable production. There are medicinal plants native to this world that can be processed into effective treatments. The discussion continued late into the night. Each problem had a solution, but implementing those solutions would require cooperation between different groups and species. This was where Taeho's leadership skills became important. We need to organize work teams, he suggested. Mixed groups with people from different backgrounds. That way everyone learns the new techniques and no single group becomes dependent on the others. Administrator Chen looked concerned. Some people might not want to work with former enemies. There is still tension between the human and helix populations. Then we start with the people who are willing, Sujin said. Success is contagious. When others see the results, they will want to participate. Over the following weeks, the plan proved correct. The first mixed work team successfully installed new water purification systems. When clean water began flowing to all parts of the settlement, skeptics became believers. More people volunteered. For the next projects, Taeho found himself in a strange but satisfying role. Instead of commanding soldiers in battle, he was coordinating civilians in construction. Instead of planning attacks on enemy positions, he was organizing supply distribution and work schedules. The skills were similar, but the purpose was completely different. The transformation was remarkable. As basic infrastructure was restored, the settlement began to thrive. Crop yields improved with better irrigation. Medical clinics reduced disease rates. Communication arrays connected isolated communities across the planet. But the real victory was something more subtle. Taeho watched as former enemies worked side by side on shared projects. He saw children of different species playing together, without fear or hatred. He witnessed the birth of a new kind of community that could serve as a model for the rest of the galaxy. 3 months after their arrival, Sujin and Taeho stood on a hill overlooking New Haven. The settlement had grown by 1,000 people as refugees from other parts of the planet heard about the successful community. New buildings were under construction. Agricultural fields stretched to the horizon. The local engineers can maintain everything now, Sujin reported. They do not need us anymore. Taeho felt a mix of pride and sadness. It was time to move on to the next world that needed help. But leaving was difficult. He had found something here that was more meaningful than any military victory. There is a message waiting for us, Sujin continued. From the Tau Collective. They have a colony, world that is struggling with infrastructure problems.